Equity and inclusion. If you would please sign in and choose your language of choice. The globe is located at the bottom of your screen. My coworker Stephanie has dropped the sign-in link in the chat box, so please make sure you do that so we can capture your attendance. If you don't have access to that, if you could scan the QR code, that's another way of signing in as well. If we want to include everyone, we have to help everyone develop their talents and use their gifts for the good of the community. That's what inclusion means. Everyone contributes. Melinda Gates. So today we will be focusing on cultivate an inclusive work environment through employee resource groups. I'm going to turn this over now to Miss Alicia Sanchez. Alicia?
Yeah, thank you. Let me share my screen here and we will get started. Well, good morning, everyone. Excited to engage in our conversation around employee resource groups. I am really excited to be one of the catalysts sharing our conversation today. So I'll get us set up here and share my screen as I indicated. So it should be showing up here in just a second there. So excellent. So I am very fortunate. I work with employee resource groups at my company. And so if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, if you have employee resource groups at your company, what that looks like for you. If you don't have employee resource groups, that's completely fine as well. Just helps give me a kind of an awareness of our conversation today and who's engaged. So, okay, I'm having some problems with my banner here. So we'll go ahead and get started. So anytime we do these conversations, certainly want to ensure that we have our conversation expectations. So you might be familiar, depending on how often you've engaged in this series. Certainly as a facilitator, have the right to halt the conversation and maintain order. Certainly have facilitated a number of conversations and never have had to do that. Certainly you've engaged with Danielle Johnson as well, perhaps, and she and I have facilitated a number of conversations together collectively and independently. So can't imagine we'd have to do that today. I do ask that you be present and respectful in the learning space. Certainly, you're here to learn about the inclusive environment and the role that employee resource groups do. I know that there's a lot going on, and so thank you for taking the time to be in our space today. I ask you to lean in. So when we lean into a space of maybe a little of discomfort, that's a place where we can learn and grow. WAIT is an acronym. Why am I talking? Why am I not talking? And so if you are someone who has a lot to contribute most of the time, I'd ask you to maybe be a little more reflective. And if you're someone who is a little more reflective, maybe would challenge you to share kind of the thoughts and perspectives that you're kind of thinking about, maybe more reflective. Certainly, we welcome anyone to share as we go through our conversation today. So if you are practicing being more reflective, don't feel like we don't want to hear your voice and contribute to our conversation today. One mic, certainly in our space today, want to be able to hear the different thoughts and contributions in our learning space. So we'll certainly be mindful and call on folks as we need to, but really want people to feel comfortable to come off mic as well. Land the plane. So whatever thought, language that you have and trying to articulate today, use the language that you have. Certainly, if it is dated language or something that maybe language has shifted, certainly language is also regional. So just ask you to get whatever thought, comment, question out. And I might, like I said, offer some complimentary language for you. Assume good intent. So as we engage in this conversation, want to assume that we're engaging in respectful conversation at a time where we're quick to call people racist and sexist and homophobic and so many other things. want to engage in a respectful space. Now, freedom of speech is not freedom of consequence. So we might say something on the call that might be impact someone else. And so we need to be mindful of the power that our words have. And then stories stay, lessons leave. As we engage in our conversation, want to engage in rich dialogue, certainly. And so if there's again, something that someone shares about themselves personally, just ask that, the concepts leave, but not necessarily the personal. So I know a lot of things to really think through, but that said, we'll keep moving on. Certainly, if there are other things that you think that I missed, feel free to drop them in the chat and we'll watch for that as well. For mindfulness, certainly it's effective to really kind of pause. I was running from one meeting to the next today, and certainly mindfulness is not a new concept by any means. And so as we think about and kind of get our mindset to be present in this space today to learn, thinking about this quote: the culture of a workplace, an organization's values, norms, and practices has a huge impact on our happiness and our success. And so really thinking about mindfulness and leaning into that and how it must be effectively managed over time, really focusing on continuous improvement, reinforcing certainly our norms and practices in the organization. So throughout our time together, certainly if you need to, readjust in your seat, plant your feet on the floor, sit crisscross, whatever makes you comfortable to be able to be fully present. Certainly encourage you to do that now as we navigate and go into our conversation around employee resource groups. So employee resource groups, certainly we're in a multi-generational space and a multicultural space, multilingual, multi-abilities. We have hybrid, there's so much more certainly to take into consideration. So I'm going to pull up our chat here and see, certainly if you, as I know, there looks like there's some things in here about signing in. So certainly make sure you do that. But again, just really curious, and you can certainly, virtually raise your hand or use the chat of, whether or not you're involved in an organization that has employee resource groups, or that you've been a part of one, and maybe the different types. There's a number of different employee resource groups that we'll talk about, affinity groups certainly as well. So would welcome if there's been any involvement, and if there's none, drop that in the chat too. So certainly want to create a space for those that have been engaged and not engaged, certainly as well. So to create some common language, employee resource groups are employee affinity or experience-based groups that could include certainly creating some synergy, some belonging, community building within the organization, even outside of the organization. So really thinking about professional development, networking, mentorship, thinking about talent attraction and retention. Certainly there are a number of ways and roles that organizations who have employee resource groups and employee resource groups certainly contribute to the overall business or organization. When we think about how we engage our employees, oftentimes there's an opportunity for exposure to upper leadership or management. So depending on what an employee is hoping to gain from these groups, right? It might be just that personal connection and opportunity for engagement. There's the opportunity when we think about affinity groups, identity-based employee resource groups, certainly thinking about how we might, if we're one of only in a room or in our team, in our organization, how we might be able to connect to others. So there's that representation piece that certainly connects to this conversation. Employee resource groups certainly are known by a number of different names, affinity groups, business resource groups, diversity groups. As I mentioned, at my company by day, if you will, I work with, we have employee business resource groups. So we're really intentional about having the business piece of things, so they tie into our overarching business strategy. As a global company, working with our various sites and the organization. So really how it shows up for us is a little bit different than how it might show up to a company that is strictly based within the US. And so the context in which we have conversations looks a little bit differently. Certainly, again, diversity groups are another way that they're known. So I want to give you an opportunity to engage in a conversation. So we're going to put you all into breakout groups here in just a minute and give you a little bit of opportunity. I know there wasn't a lot of things that came in the chat around employee resource groups, but in your small group, hopefully you'll have an opportunity to think through some of these questions. So the first one is, thinking about employee resource groups. Do they exist within your organization? If they do you perceive them as impactful? And certainly as we think about impactful, that is, certainly subjective. And so would allow you to think about, what does impact mean for you? Is that providing connection? Is that engagement? Is that moving initiatives within the company forward? And then kind of share, right? As I was alluding to what impact looks like and means, perhaps, certainly think about the impact that they have made on yourself, on your teams. Now, if you're in an organization where employee resource groups are not present, do you think that they would be impactful if they're implemented? Share your thoughts, certainly around what that might look like as well. And then, what are some best practices, or when you think of successful initiatives that employee resource groups have done, what do you think that they should be shared more widely? Are there some best kept secrets that we need to ensure? And then if we can identify maybe one person in the different groups to share insights with the larger group when we come back here. So I'm going to drop in the chat the information on the slide so that you all can see that. I also will work to try and get that in there so you have it to be able to see once you go into your breakout rooms here. And we're going to give you about 6 minutes, so not a lot of time, to get you into breakout. So I'm gonna stop sharing here for just a second. And Steph,
yes, going to open them now.
okay.
We'll talk. Jennifer.
All righty. Well, it looks like all of our breakout rooms are closed. And I forgot earlier to mention, but certainly if you're able to come on camera, we would love to see your face, and smiling or not, right? Depending on that, right? Don't want to. So if you are, but understand that not everyone is in a place and space to do so. So certainly helps with engagement. So hopefully you all had a chance. I know, again, 6 minutes goes really quickly in this time, but want to open it up to see, conversations, insights. So we had 2 breakout rooms. So would love to hear from someone in each breakout room, if you could recall which one where you're in, but at least 2 people. Who wants to start us off and just share about your conversation?
I can share.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'm from CCRC, and we do have these types of workshops, I guess you can say, for our staff. I did share how prior to COVID, I felt like there was more options for us to be a part of some of these workshops, because most of them were in person and there were a little bit more engagement when taking part of those. Now we still have those opportunities, but it's more like take the trainings at your own time, at your own pace type of thing, online, which is great because you still have the flexibility if you're in, it's like for us, for example, right now it's our busy period, so we can schedule those trainings whenever it's flexible for ourselves. But I do miss that in person as much as we used to have them prior.
Yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for that. Do you all have employee resource groups? I know you talked a little bit about some of the training, but in terms of kind of like the affinity groups and things like that,
We do. They're the ones that would facilitate all of
Okay,
this.
gotcha.
Yeah. So it's but now it's everything is majority of our staff is remote, so we have to really cater to that as well.
Mhm.
I think it's recently, like I think we just had an in-person training. It was more like a meet and greet type of thing
Okay.
from these resource groups.
Mhm.
But I can see us slowly going back to more of the in-person resource
Yeah.
trainings that they provide.
Excellent. No, thank you. I just wanted to kind of clarify to make sure like that they were maybe some of those groups are the ones that were driving some of that engagement and training and workshops. And, certainly we know a virtual environment is great. We have people from all over the place. So in the spirit of transparency, I'm in Wichita, Kansas. And so, how we can connect with folks, certainly with many of you, in the California area or whatnot, certainly looks really different. And so there's certainly some benefits. It's just how we leverage, the platform to do that. Certainly we have, I mentioned the company I work at, we're global. And so when we connect to other sites in our employee resource groups, we build in some time to do kind of the breakout rooms where we have engagement, but certainly we all know that person, face-to-face engagement is really much more meaningful as well. So would love to hear from someone else, thoughts that came up. If you don't have a resource group, any conversations that maybe came up for you all. Diane, I see that you're off mute.
Yep. We had two people who, one's with the Children's Center, one's with mental health, and they do have the ERGs.
Okay.
And then myself, I'm a volunteer program, and I don't have really have an ERG. And the other person had a very small staff. They don't really have, they pretty well work together without the ERGs. However, with my group, it is required. I mean, let's put it this way: the best training comes from, of course, our own facilitation training, but to understand the population that we work with, that's where the DEI and the trauma come in. We work with a lot of people that have gone through trauma.
Yeah.
We work with anger management, so and we work in the prisons also. So we have quite a base of people who have gone through trauma. And we have to know how to deal with that. We don't have to heal them, and we're not their psychologists, but we need to know whether they can even be in the workshop. They may have to get some help first before they can attend a workshop. And so those are decisions we have to make. And so I refer my facilitators to these trainings. They're online, they're able to get to them on their schedules, they can work around it. And I think it's really great that they're being offered by Best Start. I mean, it's just really an opportunity to grow and to understand our world, because we do work with we're a worldwide program, so we work with diversity all over the place. And the other two groups, they have their affinity groups, they're big organizations, and they do have their own resource type driven groups and affinity groups and all this stuff. So they do them quite a bit. The one girl from mental health said she's pretty new to it, but she's already been through several different trainings, and they're referring her to different other groups. So just being connected. That's just part of our world now. We have to be connected. Thank goodness that COVID came, brought us all a little bit closer. We found something that we had in common, and that helped a bit. So, but now I love having the online trainings where when I can get to them, I can, attend them on my own little time here. And I do enjoy them. I get a lot from them. And I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate you sharing as well some of the insights. And certainly, I think one of the things, and certainly not to get ahead of myself in some of our content, but really thinking through, I appreciate the organization that's smaller in size. Obviously, if you have a handful of people on a team, it doesn't necessarily make sense. And so, as we think about best practice, one thing I might offer, and certainly if there are other best practice or things that people have found, would welcome, others to share or utilize the chat, of course, as well. But does it make sense for an organization, and what's the exact size, that when you think about, is it having, 200 or 300 employees, is that kind of the sweet spot to then evaluate affinity groups or a affinity group. One that we have at my company is a employee affinity group. So if you work at the company that I'm at, it's really about retaining our talent and our employees and providing engagement, where we have others that are focused on like the Latin kind of Hispanic culture. We have another one that's around veterans as well. And so thinking about what makes sense so that employee engagement and retention group was the first group that really started at our company, is to really kind of foster that connection piece of things. So a couple things I would say is, what makes sense in terms of a size of an organization and the need for that employee resource group. Because if you have just maybe one or two folks of one identity, does that make sense to bring together and create that? So again, kind of thinking through the size of an organization and developing those. So yeah, no, thank you, Emily, for dropping that in the chat, right? The really thinking about your staff and retention. And so, there are other things that employees can do certainly as well. So, thinking about some of the concepts that we'll talk about, appreciate Emily's kind of calling that out with a smaller team. What are some of the ways that you can take kind of the concept of an EBRG or an ERG and apply that a little bit differently to the size of a team? Because certainly it's not a one size fits all, and what will work at one company or organization might not work at another. So want to pause and just see if there's any other thoughts or comments that came up that we haven't captured in our discussion and debrief. No. Okay, certainly. Well, as they come up, certainly welcome any thoughts, drop in the chat, or you can certainly unmute. Let me share my screen again. And don't worry, I'm not going to give you a full history lesson today, but I do think it's important to think about little thing. Think about kind of the history of employee resource groups. Oftentimes when we think about, different diversity initiatives, and there's certainly a connection and a correlation to employee resource groups, many people think that these are, new initiatives, things that have come up, but they originate, all the way back to the 60s. And again, when we think about the civil rights movement and the racial tensions in the United States, at 1964, along with the company's Black employees, the former CEO of Xerox came up with the idea in response to some of the race riots that occurred in the New York area where the company was located, was around bringing people together. And so, at a time where, they had a progressive hiring program, once, employees were onboarded, and unfortunately the reality is that many of these things that were happening then do still happen today. And so a lot of times employee resource groups, the impetus comes from, tension between individuals. And certainly with Xerox's Black employees, they launched a national Black employees caucus to create a space for Black employees to discuss their experiences, to advocate for change. So really, again, thinking about, how do they elevate their voice and kind of that collective representation for them. And at that time, it was, that was the first in the United States, in our country, official employee resource group. And so, Hewlett Packard began the first LGBT ERG, and it was the Gay and Lesbian Employee Network. So looking there at that, and that's in the 70s. And so, now, the group is known as the Pride Business Impact Network. So, we've seen some different changes over the years. I mentioned a few of the employee resource groups that are representative at our company. And so as we kind of think through that historical perspective. So have a video here that kind of shares the perspective, and we'll hear from Joe Wilson at Xerox. And yes, I do apologize that the video is a little grainy, but this is, again, thinking back from the late 60s, early 70s here on it. So let me get it queued up, and I also ensure that We have our captions on for Spanish if needed.
We are a company which pays a premium on imagination.
Pause for just 1 second, get this switched over. My apologies here. And we'll try this one more time. If you'll do a thumbs up to let me know that you can hear the sound okay, that's helpful. Okay, thank you, Diane.
Company which pays a premium on imagination and the use of creativity and the use of brains to think of new ideas. We don't want to do things the same old way. We suspect the same old way. Therefore, as you come here, I hope you come with an attitude that change will be a way of life for you. You will not be doing things tomorrow the way you're doing them today. And if you do, we will feel that some way or other the momentum that has taken years and years to build up is perhaps slowing down, and I assure you we'll bend every effort we know how to keep it from slowing down. Therefore, we're seeking people who are willing to accept risk, who are willing to try new ideas, who have new ideas of their own, who are not afraid to change what they are doing from one day to the next or 1 year to the next, who welcome new challenges, who welcome new people, who welcome new positions. And if you're that sort of person, you'll be very welcome here at Xerox.
A really interesting video there. And this was something that they utilized for employee orientation, really, more progressive in thoughts when we think about the time frame, but really encouraging employees. And so, as we know with talent, we need to be able to create spaces for people to come in. So really kind of interesting to think back to how long employee resource groups and the work that, Xerox, spearheaded, certainly. So as we think about employee resource groups, this is another example here of a group. So the Greyglers, if you will, helped Google succeed by sharing their experience and advocating for the needs of Googlers and users at all different ages. And so they advocated for age positive policy change within the company, promote awareness of age diversity and issues related to age, and to really support their employees and their team members throughout their career, so that Google really remains a workplace for all employees. And so really thinking about employee resource groups are global. And so what they look like, as I mentioned before, in one country and one continent, certainly look at Europe and Asia and Latin America, they're multicultural. They may be focused on LGBTQ plus identities, diverse abilities as well. And so, thinking about what the Greyglers did, as I shared that initially with that photo that's there, we're a multi-generational organizations. And so what that looks like, when we think about performance, as an organization, we don't oftentimes think about the folks that are close to retirement. And so how are we preparing people when they're, transitioning out of the workforce and planning for retirement? We're usually really trying to focus on the employees that are, the longevity is greater. And so really another good example of, how employee resource groups are engaging and the power that employees have when they do put them into place. And so again, really that empowerment is a key piece to employee resource groups. So again, as I mentioned, there are a variety of different examples, the Pride Network, Latinx, Black Network, Women's Network, Young Professional, see a lot of those groups, Asian, veterans, certainly, I've seen others that are focused around caregivers. So really thinking about what is that collective group that wants to come together with that affinity based on, certainly, employee resource groups are open to anyone. We can't necessarily exclude, depending on the type of organization that you are, might have the opportunity to evaluate some of those things. But, how do we allow people who are not necessarily even a part of a group to be able to learn and grow. Certainly with the Veterans Network, we've had many people who engage who are a patriot, that, you know, they have a spouse while they may not specifically be a veteran, but how do we create a space to allow them to engage as well? And so I think that's what's really great is there's an opportunity in a safe space to be able to expose people to different identities, while still celebrating and allowing our employees to celebrate, and volunteers, those identities. So I have another video to show you here. Now, this video is specific to a company, Stryker company, but if, you know, so yes, it is specific, but this is a great way and, you know, can be a marketing tool to share with employees, you know, outward of the impact of an employee resource group. You know, I saw this video and I shared it with my marketing team. I said, wow, you know, we need something very similar, you know, right? The power. So yes, it is specific to one company, but I think some of the principles and the tenets that are outlined might be something that, as you all think about what it looks like in your organization, or organizations you might work with, how it might show up. So I'll cue this one up as well here. And get my subtitles on and the language.
ERGs seriously just bring people together, and to me that is what community is, bringing people together through common interests and shared passions to make a difference.
Coming into work, I feel validated, I feel seen, I feel heard, and I feel that the company is really invested in me as much as I'm invested in the company, and that's very important to me.
Our employee resource groups, they play a crucial role in helping us create an environment of inclusion, engagement, and belonging.
I think everyone leaves with their chin a little higher, their steps a little lighter. It's something that Stryker employees put on for Stryker employees, so it's you know, by the people for the people.
ERGs really helped create a culture at Stryker where we could talk about difficult things and we could have conversations to become better at diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think that's made everyone be able to come to work and be their authentic selves more.
If it wasn't for my work with SAFE, I wouldn't have realized that I'm non-binary. I wouldn't have changed my pronouns and adjusted my name to reflect the person I am inside, and I wouldn't feel as comfortable being myself inside Stryker or outside in the greater community.
There is nothing more important than knowing that we can bring our whole selves to work. I am so proud of how our ERGs empower our employees to bring their true selves to work every day.
I want people to remember that they are remarkable, that they have the tools to build that self-confidence, and that they can go on into their careers and ask for what they deserve and know that they have the support.
ERGs are a way for me to interact and build friendships with other people in the organization that I otherwise wouldn't even have had exposure to.
It increased my knowledge about specific issues and specific things that I might not be aware of.
You know, as a leader of a team, it also gives me tips and cues and guidance for how I can facilitate those conversations across my team to make sure that we're having the open dialogue and really building a sense of community.
It's made me a better person. It's made me someone who is more empathetic and thoughtful in my roles, both personally and professionally. And overall, it's just been some of the most meaningful work I've done at Stryker. I'm really proud of it.
The legacy I'd like to leave is that Stryker becomes a career destination for people of color. I want this place to be somewhere that people of color can come and feel comfortable and be their authentic self, to stay here and to build a career here.
The mission of our company is to make healthcare better, but it's greater than that, and it's making people in the community better.
So I want to pause there for just a second to see Any thoughts or takeaways that you have from the video? While again, I know it is specific to one company, but was there anything that stood out to you of like, oh, that's something that, you know, I can maybe think about how that might apply to what I'm doing or other ways of engagement? Or any other thoughts that maybe came up?
This is Diana. I think that's really important to be able to, if you're going to work with each other, to have the chance to be with like-minded people and build those relationships so that you have the strength, you feel supported, and you can do your job well when you feel supported and you feel affirmed, and that's where you get the strength from. So it's really important to have those smaller groups within the bigger group, so that you can keep building your own self-esteem.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. You know, Emily had shared, you know, having a smaller team, but, you know, thinking about what are ways with the concepts of, you know, creating an opportunity in a smaller team dynamic to have those, I don't know, I'll say like an inclusion moment, an opportunity to engage in a conversation in a similar way. For those that are willing and want to, and creating a space to do that. So would just offer that for smaller teams. You know, certainly, you know, looks a little different, but there are certainly some of the kind of different initiatives and tactics that could be applied. Any other thoughts? Want to open up to see if there are any other comments or takeaways from anything really. So, but specifically the video. No worries. So just want to make sure that we have space for folks to engage. So when we think about, you know, the connection to advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion, DE&I initiatives, certainly that's been an underlying mention in our conversation today. But certainly thinking about how we can foster a culture of inclusion, how it improves diversity. I think the video did a great job of really segueing into this as we think about the connection to this work, you know, certainly helping and including employees feel a sense of belonging, a part of a community, you know, through connections that really counter, you know, the feelings of being only in a space. And so belonging to an employee resource group, you know, employees can really feel like their authentic self. And so McKinsey's done a significant amount of research around this work and thinking about talent attraction, you know, thinking about having a pool of employees to really tap into for diverse panels, recruitment events, you know, thinking about it from a branding and community standpoint, you know, that really showing that, you know, hey, we're a welcoming community, even thinking back to that Xerox video as well. And so there's a lot of ways from a social impact to help with branding, visibility, volunteerism. You know, certainly they can also think about, you know, a remote environment. We heard a couple things where yes, training and opportunities for engagement can be really helpful. And so how do we bring folks together? You know, Clorox has done this where they have organizations that are working remotely, but coming together virtually to collaborate. So again, different ways to engage, to promote kind of that internal and external impact. And thinking about it. So there's another on the photo here where it says parent resource group, another example of people coming together based off of an affinity as well. So effective employee resource groups, right? When we think about kind of the data that connects to this, you know, 90% of Fortune 500 companies sponsor employee resource groups. We see that Diversity Inc., which is a benchmark. The Diversity Inc. does a lot of work, but they benchmark companies. But the top 50 companies for diversity all have employee resource groups. So really thinking about that as a best practice. We see that 76% of corporate diversity professionals believe that companies support well aligned with diversity and inclusion initiatives, and that employee resource groups are a part of them as well. And so again, really thinking about, you know, how we connect, you know, the impact of them, right? Making that business case certainly as well is really important with this work. So as we think about, kind of the effective employee resource group, want to share, just some best practice. So if you're thinking, what might this look like for me, for my organization, or, as you're a part of a professional organization. So just some things that I would share, making sure that there's a clear purpose. Certainly a few of these things have come up in our conversation, but really defining what is the specific objective and goals of an employee resource group. How does it connect to to your organization's mission, your vision, your values, your diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. So ensuring kind of from a foundation. And then understanding, what's the interest. So thinking about surveys, focus groups, gauging employee interest, and then seeking input from employees to identify, what are some of those focus areas for that. And then ensuring that you have executive or leadership support. So, I've seen companies and organizations work with employee resource groups, an executive sponsor. Sometimes they are a part of that affinity group. Sometimes they're not a part of that affinity group. And so there's a couple of different schools of thought. Really depends on that individual and that executive. Someone that might be in an organization, what's their connection point, making sure they have visible support and sponsorship from, demonstrate a commitment to all employee resource groups and certainly diversity and inclusion, that they're actively participating, right? We realize that not everyone can be at everything, but what's that look like? And then thinking about alignment, again, this kind of connects back to that purpose, but how does this dovetail and connect into, the company's strategic objectives, any sort of goals that they might have around diversity and inclusion, and thinking about kind of the larger overall enterprise or organizational level strategies. At my company, we've had a huge push to grow the number of Black African American employees. As that number has grown, there has been some interest from our leadership team within the organization, which does not reflect Black or African American identities, unfortunately, yet. But really asking. So, I've had conversations with this identity and this population, our Black African American employees, about it. But the work that gets put on, oftentimes, that population within our organization, they're asked and tapped to do all the recruitment, all the talent acquisition, the community events. So for some groups, it just doesn't make sense for them. Now they're informally doing it, but because the population is still relatively small, for us that right now, that population has said, what, an employee resource group doesn't necessarily make sense for us, and the bandwidth and availability of people to do that, certainly. Other things, certainly, as we think about, establishing the purpose, having an employee resource group executive sponsor or champion, creating that business purpose, but really setting and establishing goals. How do we measure success? What are the key performance indicators to track that success? Having a consistent schedule, and having a sufficient budget that is connected to it certainly is really important. So from a business and organization standpoint, what are the financial supports, allowing people the time away from their day-to-day job to be able to do some of these things, to whether that's planning and coordinating events and trainings and other initiatives, attending those same events. So really thinking about what that looks like. Again, we don't have, when people are, doing their signing time and recording time each week when they're working, it goes to a very specific account, and we don't have an account that then supports some of these activities for our hourly employees. So that's been a challenge and a huge gap, and a disconnect for us in a company. And so we're having conversations of how do we reduce that gap, and how do we identify dollars to be able to cover, the hourly and salary population that aren't able to get away to do some of those things. So thinking about cross collaborations. So again, some really specific, tangible things. If you decide that you want to engage in the development, enhancement of an employee resource group. Certainly some other things as we think about employee resource groups, want to be and have to be very mindful of additional considerations for, and to be effective. So, employee resource groups are not to be tokenized. They're, for diversity efforts, when we think about, the answer to DE&I challenges, I shared with you, certainly with our Black African American employees, a big concern from them was that this was, oftentimes it's great to have things that are coming from the top of an organization. They felt like there was a little bit of a concern around being tokenized as a smaller population and having that group to say, hey, come to our company because of X, Y, and Z, and we have this employee resource group. So really almost utilizing it for that tokenization and the answer to, kind of the challenges that we have with recruiting and retaining that population. Thinking about resource allocation, again, providing people the time. With our leadership council members, we're able to allow them to come in and we build it into their performance plan, and is able to be a part of their role within the work when they're involved with it. So it's not doing it off the side of their desk. So having the buy-in and support of our employees, managers, and leaders, depending on the size of an organization, and making sure that is set, the expectation is set, and everyone is in alignment for that. Thinking about training, certainly people might have a passion to do events, to do training, to facilitate conversations, but how are we developing them to do that successfully? Diane, I really appreciated when you were talking about some of your mental health professionals and the work that they do and the generational trauma, or I threw in the word generational, but oftentimes some of the trauma that people are experiencing is generational. And so what that looks like, how do we prepare folks to navigate where it's really, radical empathy that needs to show up, certainly not solving their problems, but and equipping people to have conversations and have a level of understanding, certainly I think is really important. The evaluation and feedback, certainly just like any role, giving timely feedback to help folks. Not everyone is a people leader. And so being aware of how we are allowing them to engage, recognizing and celebrating the success. There are so many great things that happen, and we get into this, grind of go all the time, but how do we really pause? How do we celebrate a win and a success, no matter how big or how small? I think having that appreciation and that gratitude and that celebration to reinforce the value and the impact that employees are, the impact that they're making on the organization. And then thinking about allies, I think that's an important piece to this conversation is, what role do we want them to play in employee resource groups? I mentioned, right, they are open, to all employees, and creating that space for allies, but making sure that there's an expectation and an understanding of what it means to be an ally coming into a space where it is intended for representation, development for certain specific affinities. So not to say they don't have a place, but really understanding the role and how we identify and articulate that as well. So I know I've shared a lot of information in our time together. As we kind of begin to wrap up, certainly we've had some good discussion throughout our time together. Certainly thinking about, resources, the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM. If you're not familiar with that organization, there are some resources on their website that are completely free and available. It, is a member organization, so some of their resources do tend to be only available to members, but would highly recommend looking at that. Thinking about, again, team building together platform, and Indeed, they have a lot of great open sourced resources. Many of the things that we've talked about today, when we think of, how we engage and bring people along for engagement, really, when I saw Emily's comment around kind of college clubs, organizations, affinity groups, right, spot on, right? This is really taking it from, for those that, are afforded the opportunity to have that collegiate experience, or even in high schools, those affinity groups really then do segue into the workplace. And we know that building those connections and finding kind of a neat niche in, high school and college really make an impact. And so thinking about it in the context of, the workplace as well. Again, McKinsey has done some great work and research. I personally am just a big fan of a lot of what they do. It's research based. They listen to employees and companies and organizations of all different sizes. And so that link is there as well. So I'll make sure that we share this deck out and the slides, in a PDF format, so it's accessible to you all to be able to access some of these resources. So I should have said that a little bit earlier on, but I know we've shared it before. But again, if you're writing furiously, want to give you a little bit of a break on your hand there to think about that. And certainly, there's no shortage. Now, I will say not everything on the internet is true. So as you start looking at employee business groups, making the business case, hopefully you have found, some resources. I believe in a both and. So yes, there is that connection to the business case, but it's also about just the right thing to do for employees in a time where there's so much happening in the world that it's hard to tune out some of that stuff. And so how do you create a space, no matter how big or how small, to be able to engage in conversations as well? So again, I know I've shared a lot of information with you. I just want to pause, see what questions there are. Maybe if there's anything that you thought I might cover that I didn't cover in our time together. So I'll pause to see if there are any questions as we wrap up our time together. I don't see any. So, well, thank you. Of course, I appreciate being able to, connect with the group. So like I said, we'll forward out the slides to everyone. I'll hang out for a minute or two. So if there is a question that you wanted to ask in a smaller setting, certainly welcome that. I'll turn it back over to you and the team to kind of close us out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alicia. Great information. I love it. Let's give her a hand if we can give her a thumbs up. And just thank you so much for sharing that very informative information. I'm going to share my screen back one more time. Again, if you have not had the opportunity to sign in, you can use our QR code to go ahead and sign in. We want to make sure we capture your attendance. So our next workshop, this will be our last one, and we have an additional one because Danielle was out one week. So we are going to still have our workshop May 1st. That will be Wednesday, May 1st. So make sure you put this down. We will be going back and covering the LGBTQ plus inclusion workshop. So we did miss it, but she's bringing that on the 1st. So you will have that information to capture. Okay. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We know you have a lot to do today. I want you to have a great day. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday hump day, and we look to see you back on May 1st. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye now.
Thank you.